the 3 boxes is one of our most popular strategies, and the reason is because basically it helps you make more money. Okay, and I remember I learned about this. I can remember the exact moment actually. I was on a plane and I was reading the Harvard Business Review, and there was this big long article about this topic, but it was like 10 pages long with lots of graphs and charts and all this stuff, and it was very academic. And it made a lot of sense, and they were talking about how, companies have 3 levels and so on. It all could have been written in 1 page. Okay, and I thought, oh, well, they're talking about the 3 boxes. And then I remembered when I was a kid, and I would go to a movie theater, and my mom would take me to a movie. So I was a little kid, and they would say, would you like to have a large or a small drink? And usually my mom would get me the small drink because I was just a little kid. And turned out that 80% of people would buy the small drink. And 80% and 20% would buy the large drink. So most people were buying the small drink when they were given those 2 choices. So that's back in the 60s. And then in the 70s, they're thinking, theater owners are thinking, well, how do we get more people to buy the large drink, right? And someone thought, well, why don't we add a 3rd size, like a super size, and see if that'll change anything, just as an experiment. So at that point, they then had small, regular, which was the old large, and then super size, which was this new super size. And what happened is that now 20% of people are buying the small one, 60% of people were buying the regular size, which was the old large, and 20% of people were buying the super size. So by adding the 3rd size, they now had 80% of the people buying the old large or an even larger size. So it was even more successful than they even imagined, right? So that was the experiment that actually then set off this idea of having 3 sizes almost at every industry. Like if you go to the gas station, it's not like 3 sizes, but there's 3 different kinds of gas, right? And then some people, I always buy the cheap gas because I have a leased car, so I don't care. But I'd be interested to know how many people buy the super premiums. Probably if you own a Lamborghini or something, right? You're going to put that kind of gas in your car. So, but the people are buying those really expensive versions of gas, right? So anyway, so we started using this strategy with our clients. Well, we actually started using ourselves, of course, with our programs. But then I started teaching this to my members of my program. And it really, really worked. And usually what happened was they would just have 1 size, typically. They said, this is what I'm selling. So I had one client, she was selling her services for $10,000. And, and it struck me that it was just because she was very comfortable with the $10,000. And I said, well, is that enough? She says, well, no, I'd like to get paid more, but I'm afraid to raise my prices. Because otherwise I might, if somebody, let's say I raise my price on my quote to proposal to $15,000, and then someone says no, then I got to think, oh my God, I just lost the client. If I'd asked for 10, I would have got it. So she never wanted to raise her price, right? It was just, I'm sure a lot of you have had that fear, right? That if I raise the price, they'll scare off somebody, and then they'll go and work with someone else, right? And that can happen if you just have the 1 size, because, you're comparing apples to apples here. And if one apple is $10,000, the other apple is $15,000, you're going to buy the $10,000 apple, right? So that doesn't actually work. You can't actually really increase the price there. So then we have the big idea. The big idea is the middle one. And I like to think of that as sort of like gourmet. So the small one's like a hot dog, and the middle one is like a gourmet meal, right? And you go, okay, well, that one, let's make that one twice, if not more than that. So in this case, my client's program, she decided, okay, well, my big idea is going to be $25,000. So they can have the basic thing for 10, or they can have the program, the big idea program for her big idea program for $25,000. Okay? Now, if you just had those two, most people are going to, 80% of people are going to take the small one. And 20% of people, at best, will take the middle one. That's what's going to happen. So that's still better, right? Because you are making some of those bigger sales, right? So, but where things really get interesting is when you add the supersize. So I got her to add a supersize at $100,000. So that's when you can shoot the moon for, because you don't care. You're not actually worried if anybody's going to buy that one. You don't care. But if they do, then it's like, wow, that's a bonus, right? You don't care. But what it's doing is it's pulling everyone into the middle, because what they're looking at now is saying, well, let's see now. I got 100,000. They'll usually look at the 100,000 first because it's just like so big and like, wow, that's just crazy. And then they'll look at the small one as 10,000. They go, I don't know, that's kind of basic, especially if it's been packaged that way. I'll go to the one in the middle. So we're selling $25,000 programs now. And it doesn't sound that expensive because they're also comparing it to the 100,000 now. You see. But what happened in her case too was that in the first month, she sold a $100,000 package. And she was really surprised, because she just offered the three, and they said, well, we'll take the $100,000 one. And so delightfully surprised. And she said, I can't believe anybody bought the 100,000. And I said, well, I do. And what I do know, though, is if you don't have the $100,000 one, no one will ever buy that because it doesn't exist. So, you might as well have it. Right? So anyway, so she was great. But then what happened was that, generally speaking, from then on, most people went for the $25,000 program. So that's why we say a big idea is something new, better, and different that takes everything to a much higher level that people can only get from you. That's the middle one. And that should be more expensive because it takes everything to a higher level. Now, you haven't raised your prices because anybody that wants to, go for the 10,000 can do it. It's just they're just a little less likely to do it. And I think it's sort of a psychological thing about their self-image, because they go, well, now I'm going to look really cheap, and I don't want to look cheap. Okay, they were being cheap. They would see, when you give them one choice, they don't have to. They can just say yes or no, or maybe haggle with you. But are they being cheap? I don't know. But when they have these three sizes and they take the small one, then they sort of feel cheap, and they don't want to feel cheap, right? So they go, well, the regular one. So that's the other thing. If you call the middle one sort of the regular one, this is the one most people do. You can just say that. Then most people will take that one because that's the safe bet. It's the safest thing to take the regular one. Now, the other thing is that, think about it. If you have one size, the safe bet is to say no. Just flat out no. I'm not buying anything. If you have two sizes, the safe bet is the small one. Right? Well, I'll be cautious. I'll just take the small one. But in this case with three, the safe bet is in the middle because that's what most people are buying. So it's just interesting to unpack the reasons why this works. And I'm sure there's a few other things that I haven't thought of. But at a certain point, whatever the theory is, it doesn't really matter. It just actually, in practical terms, it just works, right? And so this is why we encourage everyone to do this. Now, the other thing is that it does also force you to innovate, right? Because you're going, okay, well, typically I just have this one thing, and I've been kind of stuck with that for a long time. But if I'm going to have something that's going to be more, bigger and more expensive and more premium and everything, well, what the heck is it? You got to come up with something, right? Like, we're not trying to rip people off. As a matter of fact, you want the middle one to be even more valuable than the price increase. Like, if you say it's $25,000, you want to, in your own mind, realize, well, it's actually worth $100,000. And if you do the $100,000 one, you want to feel like, well, it's really worth $1 million to people, right? But what it does is it forces you now to think about, well, what could I offer them at those levels? Now, the other thing, though, is if you know that you're going to get that money, then you realize, well, I can put more ingredients in there, more quality ingredients in it. So then you're really making it worth it. And then you can actually go, yeah, I could put all these other people in here. I could provide these resources, and and you're not feeling hesitant because you realize, well, we'll get paid good money for that. And I have so many stories of what people have done with this. But my favorite one is this fellow. He had these restaurants in Wisconsin. So a couple of steak restaurants. And he read my book, How to Sell Lobster, which on its face is sort of about restaurants, right? And anyway, so he read the book, and he said, I want to do this 3 boxes thing in my restaurant. What do you think I should do? So I said, okay, so what you have is you have your $8 drinks. We're gonna have $25 drinks, and then we're gonna have a $600 drink. And he said, a $600 drink? Like, who the heck's gonna buy a $600 drink? And I said, well, that's not really the point, right? He said, oh yeah, right. It's gonna get more people to buy the $25 drink, which is actually what happened. So when he put this $600 drink on the menu, and then this scotch, like the bottles were like $6,000 a bottle or something. So he had a bottle of it, and he had it like in a little case. And I always joke that you could have like a security guard standing beside the case, right, guarding the bottle. But everybody was talking about the $600 drink because it was like kind of mythic almost, right? And then but people were buying the $25 drink now because they had that $600 drink in their mind. And but one night somebody came in and bought 12 $600 drinks for his friends, and I thought maybe they had made all this money on Bitcoin or something, right? So he was going out and he went to splurge. So my client called me and said, somebody bought 12 of these drinks. I can't believe this, And I said, well, I do, because I said, once again, if you don't have it, the $600 drink, no one's ever going to buy it, right? Like this just not going to happen. So you might as well. And so that's what he's done ever since. And every once in a while, somebody will go for it, right? Because somebody's, like, you want to have something if people really feel like splurging kind of thing. Now, that other client of mine who had sold a $100,000 consulting program, she asked the client, she said, well, why did you hire me, ultimately? You were looking at other companies, right? He said, well, we hired you because you were the most expensive. You were the most expensive. So she was like, okay, I've lived my entire business career trying to keep my price down, and you're telling me that you hired me because I was the most expensive. So that was a very instructive moment for her, and for all of us, is that we've been told that we should keep our prices down, right? That's kind of the goal. But that's sort of a bottomless, that's sort of a slippery slope, right? Like if you just you get cheaper and cheaper in your own mind because you're trying to keep the price cheap for everybody. So you end up with kind of a cheap hot dog business, right? Like that's what you end up with. But if you start adding these other boxes on there, then it kind of opens your mind up to this whole other world that's out there, which is that not everybody's looking for the cheapest thing. Let's say we were selling tires, okay? Or let's say you're going to buy tires. Let's do it that way. So you're going to go buy tires, and they say, well, you have these cheap tires. These are like used tires, and they're like $50 each. And then there's these tires. They're like $250 each. They're new, good tires. And then we have these, $2,000 a piece tires. They're $8,000 for 4. And you go, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to buy the cheap tires because if they blow out on the highway, then that's not safe. And also, somebody could get hurt. And then it also would be probably cost me a lot to get the car towed and everything else. So I'm going to go with the middle one because those are good, decent tires. I don't know. It's $250 good tire. I don't know. But let's say that is. I don't know tire prices. But I'm not going to go for the $8,000 tires because I don't need that, right? But I go for the middle one. So you're going to be confronted with this continuously now since I told you this. And chances are you're going to go for the middle one. And a lot of times just because you realize, well, I don't want the cheapest one. I do not want that because the quality's not there, given that I've been given these choices, right? Now, if you were like a student and you just bought your first car and, you bought the car for $500, then you might buy the retreads, right? But typically, no. So you are always probably going to go to the middle, even though I've told you this. And the other thing is that everyone has the thing, almost everyone has the thing where they'll buy the most expensive, whatever it is. So I typically, it's like, let's say you're a golfer, right? You love golf and you play golf every day. You may buy the like $10,000 golf clubs or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that isn't even, I don't know what people are paying for golf clubs, but let's say that's a lot. That would be a lot for me. So $10,000 golf clubs, because that's the thing you love, right? Right? But then you go and do something else. Like, oh, I'm buying the cheap thing for that, right? Because I don't care about that. So everyone has this thing that they might spend the most for. So that's why this 3 boxes concept is kind of a way to liberate yourself from being cheap, I took economics as part of my university studies, and one of the most important, I guess, economic theories is elasticity of demand. Maybe you've heard of that. The elasticity of demand typically is as you lower your price, sales will go up. So you try to find that point where you can lower your price enough that you'll get the maximum amount of customers, and that will give you the sort of optimal amount of revenue vis-a-vis profit. That's the theory. So what's really everyone has, in business kind of bought into that theory, whether they learned that or not, they bought into that. Well, if I keep my price down, I'll get more customers. But that's not necessarily true, as I've just said. You may lose customers, right? Like, let's say you had a hotel, like one of those kind of a motel, and it's like $99. You know how you drive by, $99 room. And maybe we've all stayed in one of those, right? You go, okay, I got to stay there. It's $99. It'll be fine. So you stay there for $99. And so, cheap room, right? Okay. So then if I was owning that hotel, though, you start to add on maybe some floors that are $500 a night, and then one floor at the top where it's like $1,200 a night, maybe a penthouse or something. So now when you go in, they say, well, what do you want? You want the $99 one, the $500 room, or the $1,200 room? And you might say, well, it's a special occasion or whatever. I just don't want to do the $99 one, or go for the $1,200. Now, if you didn't have that $1,200, that particular customer might go somewhere else, right? So by having this, we basically cover off all the customers. And the last thing I'll say is that it allows us to dream, okay? It allows us to dream because we kind of lose that somehow in business, right? We get caught up in the price and people are nickel and diming us and we can't dream anymore. So I had one client, she does life coaching, and so I said, well, what's your dream? What's your ultimate supersize, right? And he said, well, I'd like to have people come to Bali and we will do these workshops, and it costs $20,000 for like 2 weeks to go there, and that would be my dream. I said, okay, so we'll make that the supersize. We'll call it the Bali experience or life experience or something, and just start putting that out there. Just tell people about it. Don't even try to sell it so much. Just tell people about it, right? And then, so that's what she did. And now, at least before COVID anyway, she was doing these things where you had like 5, 6, 10 people come. They're paying $20,000. That included airfare, I guess, or whatever, an hotel. but she was having the time of her life because now people were buying her supersize, right? And it allowed her to dream. She says, well, I said it was great because I could put that out there without giving up my, $120 an hour life coaching sessions, which was her small box, right? So all of us now can think about what our 3 boxes are.